Good afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure for me to be here. So if you look at this, at the heading, Tomorrowing Today, number 1, this is copyrighted, so don't copy the word tomorrowing, it doesn't exist. But I took the liberty to invent it overnight, sorry for that. And if I press once, Tomorrowing Today or Futuring Fuchs, the idea behind is, when we talk about sustainability later, is from the very meaning of the word sustainability, which is important, but it actually means to sustain something, to sustain a current business model. If there are disruptions or whatever, the question which is always asked is, how do we sustain a current business model? So that is important, and I have a couple of slides later, but I think we must also start to think one step beyond that. If there are disruptions in today's business world, like immobility or digitalization or whatever, we can ask ourselves the question, what do we do to sustain the current business model? But how do we tomorrow our business? What do we do with all this disruption? And can it even be that these disruptions are not only a threat, but also an opportunity? So that's why a little bit playing with the words Tomorrowing Today or Futuring Fuchs. So what do I plan to do? There are 3 parts in this presentation. I would like to show you a little bit about Fuchs. And in order to save some slides, there is a short video, 3 minutes in English, and then a couple of slides. And it's important to understand the strategic approach that we took with regard to our sustainability management. It is important to understand Fuchs and the market landscape and the competitive landscape of the Fuchs company in which we are moving, because we try to develop our sustainability approach very strongly according to the DNA of our own company. So a little bit about the lubricants market and then about sustainability. So let me start with Fuchs. When I say Tomorrowing Today or Futuring Fuchs, it makes sense to look first at the past and the present of Fuchs, which should come now, and I can drink it.
How does a one-man operation develop into a leading global lubricant company? At Fuchs, we have a clear answer to this. We focus on what we have been doing successfully for over 80 years. Lubricants. Not only do we understand our customers' applications and processes, we also appreciate the people we work with. Lubricants, technology, people. This 3-pronged approach has been at our company's core since 1931 and is actively pursued today by all companies within the Fuchs Group. We focus 100% on our core business worldwide. This revolves around development, manufacture, and sales of lubricants and related specialties. With more than 10,000 products, we offer our customers a complete portfolio in 5 product categories of the highest quality and for virtually all industries and requirements. Our worldwide network of research and development experts works together to create holistic, innovative, process-oriented, and tailor-made lubricant solutions for the most diverse customer applications. We bundle interdisciplinary expertise quickly and efficiently and are already investing today in the key technologies of tomorrow. We encourage a high degree of personal commitment among our employees, while also offering scope for individual development. We see ourselves as a team and believe in fair, open, and trusting interaction. Worldwide, more than 100,000 customers from diverse industries and sectors rely on our products and services. Fuchs lubricants are used wherever friction needs to be reduced and power transmission optimized. Our products comply with the highest quality standards. They reduce material wear and oil consumption to a minimum, can withstand the toughest thermal loads, while maximizing run times and extending replacement intervals. They offer reliable protection from corrosion and deposits, help save fuel, and reduce CO2 emissions. They are food grade and environmentally friendly, and much more. Fuchs Lubricants stand for performance and sustainability, for safety and reliability, for efficiency and cost savings. They represent one promise: technology that pays back. No matter what is required of our lubricants, we have the right product for every application. We are more than a supplier of lubricants. In fact, we are also a solution provider, a partner for development, a generator of ideas, and a driver of innovations. And we are only satisfied when our customers, suppliers, business partners, and investors see us as their partner for lubricants. Lubricants, technology, people. Fuchs.
And this we can do a little quicker. So Fuchs is a typical B2B company. That is why you would not find Fuchs lubricants like, for instance, Castrol or Liqui-Moly in the supermarket shelves, because we only supply the big OEMs and the big industrial customers, especially in Europe. In Asia it's different. And we always try and like to say that we are the best of both worlds. We are a publicly listed but family-run company. The company was founded 85 years ago. As you can see over here, we've got about 5,000 employees. Our shares are listed in the MDAX. We were a typical SDAX company. In 2008, we stepped over to the MDAX. This I will explain a little later. We are the largest independent lube manufacturer in the world. The word independent needs further explanation. In 2015, we exceeded the 2 billion, need to get used to it, the 2 billion sales barrier. We have got 57 companies worldwide. As I said before, we are a publicly listed but family-run company, so the ordinary shares are held by the Fuchs family by 54%, which secures our independence. We would be and we are acquisition target number one by the big vertical integrated companies. But as the Fuchs family ever since holds more than 50%, yeah, that guarantees your freedom and your independence. So this is important. And we are a so-called full-line supplier. That means we supply each and every segment of the lubricant industry which is possible. We are a well-diversified company because we are not only supplying in Europe, we also have production plants in Asia, in Australia, in the United States. And also our customer base is well diversified, so we do not only supply, I think there is a slide in the next one. So as you can see here, most people always think, oh yeah, lubricants, I understand this, motor oils, okay, it goes to the car industry. So if the car industry booms, everything must be great, and if the car industry goes down, you must suffer. No, it's not exactly the case. I mean, the figure is not on here, but we supply only 28% to the car industry and the vehicle components industry, but that means that 70% of our business goes in all these other segments. And talking about cars, most people also always think, as I just said, okay, I can understand that's motor oils, yeah, gear oils. But if you talk about a full-line supplier, this is, I think, a very nice picture where you can see how many different application areas, only in a car, there exist for lubricants. Sometimes these are just minimal lubrication, very few kilograms with a huge margin behind, specialty lubricants. So, but that is just interesting to see that we do not only supply motor oils and gear oils to our customers. And so I think that's in a nutshell enough on Fuchs. I just also heard that you already said a lot about Fuchs, so I should just not go too much into detail. But I think it is important to look a little bit to the market in which we are operating. So the message to this slide is the global lubricants market in terms of consumption, as you can see, is more or less stagnating. So here, 10 years ago, we had a market volume of round about 36 million tons. And as you can see, yes, we also had a crisis, which is quite obvious, but then slowly and steadily, the market consumption again came up. So the message here is, you could easily say, well, there is no movement in the lubricants market. We had 36 million tons 10 years ago, and we still have 36 million tons. This is true on a global basis, but more interesting is the next slide. If you look over here, of course, there was a lot of movement, what we call regional dynamics, and this needs to be explained. It can be easily explained by a typical example. because this slide should not mean that Europe and North America are not important anymore and the music only plays in Asia. This would be wrong. In Europe and in the Western world, the people tend to use more highly sophisticated, technically advanced lubricants. And think of a car, the more advanced a lubricant is, the longer the oil drain intervals. That means you change the motor oil, not every 3 years, but every 5 years or every 10 years. That means the specific consumption in a year goes down, but there's a lot of more quality in and a lot of more sales behind. This happens in Western Europe and also partly in North America, whereas in countries like China or in Asia Pacific, there is more the drive towards industrialization, motorization. People who didn't drive a car or a bike or an e-bike 20 years ago are now getting cars and so on. So there you've got like an increase in demand. So the nutshell is that this should not mean that Europe is not important anymore as a market and everything is good in Asia. Still amazing to see that if you look in the figures in parentheses, that Asia Pacific makes more than double the amount with regard to market consumption than North America. It's even always interesting also for us if you look back 10, 20 years. This is also just one message. Everyone in this room, in average, you never knew this before, consumes on average 5 kilograms of lubricants per year. Of course, this is again different, so it's not true. These are international students here. So I would just say for the Western European students, everyone would consume even double the amount. On a global basis, we've got 5 kilograms of consumption. Interesting to see that the average North American, although it's a mature market, uses double the amount of lubricant than in Western Europe. This all has to do with these are the usual signals that we always have from North America, so they need a little longer time to understand that more technically advanced lubricants are more expensive, but they last longer and whatever. So they also came down, but they still have a long way to go. And there is no awareness for, or not so much awareness still for, sustainability, environmentally friendly lubricants. So in the Midwest, I studied there 1 year. They just take whatever they get and fill it into their engine. And when it's empty, they throw it somewhere and then they go to the next petrol station and use the cheapest new lubricant. I know this is a little bit too black and white, but more or less this explains this difference. So, and a lot of potential here in Asia Pacific, because if this now, which is like 3 kilograms, becomes 6 kilograms, and you think about the people living there behind, this are going to be certainly the most important lube markets in the world in terms of volume. This is also maybe just interesting to get a feeling about the market. So I don't know any ranking where China is not leading in these days. So the largest lubricant market is China, but as you can see 10 years ago, this was not the case, more or less on the same level like the United States. And these top 20 lube markets make up more or less already 75% of the overall global lube consumption, just in order to get a feeling of the market. The message in this slide is there are about, not so many, there are about 720 lube manufacturers in the world. Now I can explain the word independent. Everyone here in this room knows the typical vertically integrated mineral oil companies like Shell, Exxon, Chevron, Texaco. So they are downstream companies, upstream companies, and they also have a lube business at the end of the process and value chain. And their lube business is still, of course, larger than the one of Fuchs. Fuchs is a so-called independent lube manufacturer. What does that mean? We don't have refineries, we don't have upstream business, we also don't have downstream business. We are at the end of the process and value chain. We have to buy in all the raw materials, even from the majors, which we need to blend our lubricants. So we are actually a blender of lubricants. We mix them. And so this is but in this field of mixing lubricants, and as an independent, we are the largest independent in the world. It becomes more obvious over here, as I said. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are all vertically integrated mineral oil companies, and Fuchs is the largest independent. Second largest independent is a company called Valvoline, mostly operating in the United States, and Gulf Oil might also be known. They're also independent, belongs to 4 Indian brothers, so they're buying a lot of small businesses. So this should just give you an overview in which market we are operating. Final comment on this. it's a challenging situation because we have to buy in the raw materials partly from our competitors. We are competing with these companies. We are also competing with the smaller ones, but they are also supplying us. So they are supplying us with raw materials, and this makes life not always easy, but so far it went very well. Okay, so this is, I think, enough for the landscape in which we are operating. Now let's talk about sustainability, and if this works, hopefully it works, didn't check it. I would like you to read this for a second. I think it can be read. Don't have to read it to you. Give you 10 seconds to read it, and then I have a question. And I can drink something. Question number 1. Would you agree with me that this sentence contains a lot of what we would call sustainability in the thinking and in the acting, a little bit at least? Silence means yes. So either you say no. If you don't say anything, then it's yes. Thank you. Question number 1, I also believe so. Question number 2, I don't know, maybe I already had it, so you don't say anything because you know, I think you know the answer. So who could have said this sentence? Think about the last 100 years. It's a typical sentence. Which famous person in the industry could have said this sentence? I don't accept silence. I want some. There is always one answer I always hear in every audience. It's always the same. One name always comes up. So I want to hear this name now. I give you the first name. Henry? Ah, okay. Exactly. And you are so wrong, because this was not Henry Ford, but this sentence was said 85 years ago by a person called Rudolf Fuchs. Rudolf Fuchs was the founder of our company. And why do I like this sentence so much? 7 years ago, when the board approached our department and said, look, we want to make a sustainability management. We believe that we have been sustainable in many ways over the past years, but there are different drivers which call for sustainability. I have a slide later. And we want you to develop this with your department and so on and so on. I went back in the chronicles of Fuchs and I read this book. There was a book which was published as part of our 75-year anniversary, which was 11 years ago. And I read this book and I found this line, and I felt that there is a lot of the sustainability thinking already embedded in our company. And what we try to do is to build the sustainability approach and the sustainability strategy of Fuchs around the DNA of our own company. And why did we start 7 years ago and not 5 years ago and not 20 years ago? There are many reasons for that, but and many drivers. So there were internal drivers that called for sustainability. You know most of these drivers. It's the same for more or less every company. And I'm not going to read this to you, but there are, of course, a lot of internal drivers that call for sustainability. There are also a lot of, does this come? Yeah, external drivers. I would like to highlight one particular driver, which is called the Code of Responsible Conduct for Business. In German, Leitbild für verantwortliches Handeln. And what happened was, we just had a slide where you saw this small dip in the market demand in the year 2008 and 2009. Everyone knows that we had a huge economic and financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And in 2010, the economic leaders in Germany came together and said, we must change something. We must change the way how we do business. There needs to be more fair trading. There needs to be social partnership. There needs to be more towards a performance principle, and there needs to be sustainability. These companies, that was with the, I cannot translate it, with the Wittenberg Center for Ethics in Wittenberg Zentrum für globale Ethik. Wittenberg Center, hopefully they call themselves like this way, Wittenberg Center for Global Ethics. And it was together also with BASF, big companies like SAP, Deutsche Bank, and Fuchs was among the pioneers, subscribers to this initiative, and committed itself, Stefan Fuchs signed that document, that we want to change the way how we do business, or at least not for Fuchs's part, but we want to be aware of all these elements, and sustainability was a part. And so what we did at Fuchs, we said, if we commit to something, we do not sign everything, but if we commit to something, then we would like to live up to it. Otherwise, it would be what you call greenwashing, useless. So that was not only, but also part of the reason why a sustainability management was established in Fuchs. And this is a slide, unfortunately it's not my own slide, but I like it very much. I had it 7 years ago and I still like to use it because for me, in a nutshell, it explains everything on what we did in sustainability and our understanding in the past 7 years. So I don't have to talk to you about economic, you know all of this, but we said from the beginning, this here, the so-called greenwashing or blue washing or whatever it is, this we do not want to do. This cannot be the Fuchs way. So this is not the way we want to go. If you see over here, yeah, sounds very good, equal consideration of all three aspects. If we are honest to ourselves and look in the mirror, this is an honorable target, but it's not always achievable. At the end of the day, if you want to be sustainable in many parts, in the beginning you need to invest money, and the return on invest might not necessarily be after 3 years, like the accountant wants it to be, or after 5 years, it might even take 10 years, but at some point in time, it pays back. So what we said in the beginning, and I still believe we are more or less on this stage, every once in a while going here, is this here. Sustainable corporate control, an internal standardization, optimization of all the processes in the Fuchs Group, and wherever possible, add a sustainable component. That was, in a nutshell, the objective that we gave ourselves. So, yeah, and this is the way how we started sustainability at Fuchs. And this is also well known to you. I do not need to explain it. For us, for Fuchs, it means, quite frankly speaking, we want to continue to be profitable and we want to make profits. It's not unethical to make profits. On the contrary, we must make profits. If we do not make profits, then everything else is useless. The only thing that changed, and I always try to say that in my thinking, if you asked 20, 25 years ago the economic leaders of a company, what are your 3 Ps? Then they always said, well, the 3 Ps for me stand for profit, profit, and profit. So that was more or less the answer you got. And I still believe there are, even in these days, 3 Ps, and they stand for profit, but they must also stand for planet and for people. So we want to continue to make profits, but we want to measure the ecological and the social impact that we have to the environment and to the society while we are making these profits. So this I do not want to go much deeper in. Social dimension for us means internally, what do we do for our employees? How do we measure this? And externally, it means what do we do for the society? So that's what we call corporate citizenship. And this here, ecological, is of course the most important part, because if we say we want to develop sustainability along the DNA of our company, Fuchs exists because since 85 years our core products are lubricants. So for me it was clear in the beginning, sustainability stands and falls and must be defined by our products. And as I said before, if we buy in 100% of the raw materials, then sustainability must be defined along our suppliers. From whom are we buying these? What are we buying from them? And if we blend lubricants, how do we produce them? That means how much energy, water, waste, carbon do we generate and produce while we blend our lubricants? And at the end of the day, our products, our lubricants, must be sustainable to the customer. The lubricant must reduce the customer's emissions, must reduce his waste, must reduce his energy. That, in a nutshell, is the definition of sustainability on the ecological side at Fuchs. And and it comes here. And so what we started in the beginning is pure measuring. This didn't exist anywhere in the Fuchs Group, so we approached all our producing companies and we said, look, we need to, all what I just told you, and so we need at least, we cannot even start sustainability if we do not have at least 4 key performance indicators on the ecological side, and which is, like, as I said, energy, water, and waste. So we started this in 2010. These are now quite fresh excerpts of our annual report 216, which was just published 2 weeks ago. And there are 2 messages for me in this slide. Yeah, it looks all great. Yeah, it looks great. Everything is going down. But if we are honest to ourselves, there are 2 things which it's not that I don't like it, but it's not yet enough. Because number 1, we are the only lubricant company in the world, unfortunately, who is publishing this data. I would not say we are the only ones who is measuring it. I don't think so. But we are the only ones who are publishing this. And what the problem is that I don't have any benchmark. So if you would ask me, okay, a lubricant company like Fuchs uses between 450 and 500 liters for producing 1 kilogram of lubricant. Okay, where's the benchmark? Is this a good figure or a bad figure? It doesn't make any sense to compare those figures with a company like BASF or with another chemical company which stands at an absolutely different position in the process and value chain. So we could make our life easier and say in the chemicals industry to which we belong to, these figures are great because we will always be better, but that is not fair and it's not true because we are only blending. So that's not the right benchmark. So number 1, and I have this later, we need to evaluate and benchmark our figures in order to get better. At this point in time, we can only do internal benchmarking. And number 2, yeah, all figures came down, that is nice, but I would not tell you the truth if I would tell you that everything was steered. Some of this is also just coincidence. Yeah? And so it's good that we have these figures. Everyone is aware in the companies. We never looked at those before, but it's not yet enough. It's just the basis. It's just the beginning. And of course, we also had some examples, best practice examples, and this I like much more, just talking about waste. How can we actually reduce waste and measure this? Now this goes very deep, but I can try to explain it in 2 words. When you blend your lubricants, then you've got these tanks, and as soon as you've completed 1 blending vessel and 1 blending of a product, you need to clean this for the next batch. And then of course, how does the cleaning go? The cleaning goes with so-called flushing oils, and these flushing oils, not good. And this is directly going into waste. So they thought, this is an example of the Mannheim plant, how can we clean the tanks without using flushing oils? And they invented a system where they clean the tanks just with air pressure, without flushing oils, which substantially reduces the waste. So this is a best practice example on how can you reduce waste, be more sustainable. This is an even better example, which also requires a little bit of explanation. In the lubricants world, we are talking about oils, which are fluid lubricants, and we are talking about greases. The difference between oils and greases is many applications require a fluid lubricant, but many applications, even in a car, require a non-fluid lubricant, which is called a grease. If you produce greases while lubricants are blended and mixed, yeah, you need a little bit of heat and so on, and a little bit of water. Greases are cooked, they are really cooked. So you need much more energy to produce a grease and much more water to cool down the reactor. So this you must know, and this is a very nice best practice example. So what this should mean is, this is an example of a company which really exists in the Fuchs Group. So they produced greases. After quite a while, they used to produce oils and also built up a grease factory. And as you can see, when the grease reactor is hot, you need to cool it down. They used tap water to cool it down. One process, and this tap water immediately went into the sewage system. Not very sustainable. Okay, they knew this, not so good. Water was cheap, but still not sustainable. In a first stage, this was the case. Okay. Then they said, well, we could install a buffer tank where we can gather the hot water and wait till it is cooled down and then recirculate it into this tank. And that is great. So they did that, and then they used less water. However, it took quite a while to cool down the water, so it was not possible to wait till the whole water is cooled down and use the same water. So they still needed tap water, but not so much like in stage number 1. And then they had a great idea. A lot of lubricants are also based on water content. And they produced more, I think it was 6,000 or 7,000 tons of lubricants, which had a huge part of water content. And the great thing was that, of course, it's not so easy like I explained it to you. They had to have a certain kind of temperature, and there was a system behind and a recipe. However, they said, well, we have a lot of water here. It even has the right temperature. Instead of waiting till the water is cooled down, let's just use this water in order to blend and mix and produce our own lubricants. And they could substantially decrease their water consumption, which I think is a great example for sustainability. We use it in the Fuchs Group, and now all the plants which have more or less the same kind of products are trying to adapt to this model. Okay, and this is an example on energy reduction. I mean, quite simple. It's an example from the United States, but don't tell anyone I told you this. It was so easy, they just didn't pay attention for many years and said, well, let's start a project, and they put some money behind, and then they said, let's just take an engineer and walk through the whole plant and see where we can insulate a lot of our equipment. And they did so. Yeah, it costed money, but I mean, project cost payback 15 months, not so much. And in 15 months, the costs were amortized, but since that day, 2014, 2015, they are saving 6 million kilowatt hours of energy year by year. What we did over here, because this is my bridge from energy to carbon. There is a fourth KPI, which I still did not reflect on. This is carbon. So we asked all our plant managers, you are buying in energy since many years. And some are buying gas, some are buying electricity, some are buying steel, and they just did it because they did it for 20 years before. And this is like an example from the Fuchs Group. Everything was measured. So as you can see, and it comes with no surprise if you're a little bit in, they are buying in 25% electricity, which, however, makes up 50% of the cost, because we know that electricity is more expensive than gas, more or less in every part of the world. And even more important, it produces 40% of the overall carbon footprint, simply because the carbon footprint behind the production of electricity is much higher, 0.6 a kilogram or whatever, than the carbon footprint behind in generating gas. So the simple approach to the companies was analyze your business, and in case it is possible that you switch from electricity to gas, you are doing two things at the same time. You literally save money, and number two, you are lowering your carbon footprint. Because if you just tell them, if you switch this, unfortunately this is still the case, even in our company, you can lower the carbon footprint. They say, well, great, but we want to stay with this. You need to trigger them with money. C'est la vie. Yeah, what can you do? But if you have one and the other, then they start to think. Okay, carbon footprint. We didn't have time to talk like how deep you are in all of this, but there is an institution which is called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which for different industries has certain rules and regulations on how you calculate the corporate carbon footprint of a company, any company. And what we did together with a partner in 2014, we calculated the corporate carbon footprint of the Fuchs Group. And as I was just talking about energy, so a lot of the carbon footprint goes into existence due to the energy that we buy. Then of course we have got transport, we have got production waste, we are flying around. All of this contributes to the carbon footprint. We have got a company car fleet, and so on and so on. Just to give you an example, in order to say we need to change a little bit with regard to the company car fleet, we introduced CO2 limits for our own company car fleet, and which numbers were behind is quite easy. We just took the numbers which the ICCT, which you know, this is this organization in the United States who discovered the VW scandal. They have country-specific CO2 limits anyway for the car manufacturers. And most companies in Germany, if they introduce something like that, not even manufacturing cars, they use it as a benchmark. So we did it so the average American doesn't have the same CO2 limit in the Fuchs Group than the European. That would not be fair. But we simply said in every country, look at the ICCT figures and do this. So we did this. We came down in Germany, and this was a good example because everyone, and it's not that everyone had to return his or her car. It was just some cars were just not good enough, especially functional cars. 2015, we introduced sustainability as regular part of our annual supplier performance evaluation, just in order to explain that every year our suppliers are evaluated according to these criteria, or have been evaluated to, of course, the normal things: price, competitiveness, development, ability, quality, and all that. And we said if we take it serious and if we want them to come down with the carbon footprint of the raw materials, then we need to make it a strong criteria. We need to evaluate them, and they take this very serious, by the way, so they want to be good. So this is something which, for the first time, I don't want to explain this to you, so we gave it 10 points, and we just had like 5 different items. We said, well, you need to have a certain kind of awareness of the normal business ethics, so code of conduct and everything, 2 points. Very rudimentary, but that is a start. And then it goes to corporate carbon footprint, product carbon footprint, up to the stage where we say, can you not only measure the product carbon footprint of the raw materials that you supply to us, but can you also come up with targets how you still deliver performance at a reasonable price, but with a lower carbon footprint? And if you think this is like living in a dream world, many of them take it very seriously, and they are working on that. Are we already there? No, but this is the first step. And talking about the sustainability strategy, 4S, or if you speak it in words, 4S, it's about, I just talked about suppliers, so the sustainability strategy of the next 3 or 4 years is that we need to evaluate and educate our suppliers with regard to corporate carbon footprint. Stakeholders, I've got an example later. Students, I mean, Laura knows it, that it's not since 20 years, but we started a lot of partnerships and different projects with the University of Mannheim. I think I've got a slide later, and standards I will explain in a minute. So if we talk about stakeholders, we are engaged in not 100, but in specific important stakeholder initiatives which are important for us. You can see them over here with the chemicals industry, responsible care, and here, it was right, Wittenberg Center for Global Ethics. So there is a new initiative with eConsense, and this Wittenberg Center just started at the end of last year, and Fuchs is one of 12 companies which is engaged in this initiative. Then here we have it. These are the different kind of corporations that we started. So we want to intensify this because my strong belief is, I really mean that, I am no longer young. It's not fishing for compliance, I am not. If I graduated in 1999, I am no longer young. You are young. And what I feel in the last 17 years, and this is really true, that the younger generation, you ask completely different questions to companies than I also did before. I feel that, and that's also one reason why I always pray in Fuchs, and it's not an easy job, that sustainability is important in many ways, because if we do not find answers, especially as a chemical company with the bad image, which we actually do not need to have, then we need to find answers for the young people and for the young talents, like, even a chemical company or a lubricant company can be sustainable. We are not going to change our business model, but we can be within the limits of our own business model. We can be, and we can try to become more sustainable. And I think if you can explain that to young people, then they might even be willing to work for a company like Fuchs. So I really believe in that. So this is important. The third S was about standards. This is an excerpt from last year's annual report. And in a nutshell, it says that, as I said before, there is no standard on sustainability in our lubricants industry. And as we are the largest independent lube manufacturer, we need to be a front runner. That is my strong belief. So not for the chemicals industry, but for our own lubricants industry, we need to set standards. Not alone. It's not only a Fuchs game, but we started an initiative. So it's with customers, it's with suppliers, but we started an initiative. You can see it over here. Just in the last year, under the roof of the German Lubricants Association, with 4 or 5 lube companies, competitors, So it's good that there is the association behind in order for compliance or whatever, but we said, as you can see over here, we need to develop our own standards, our own KPIs, our benchmarks, and we did that in Germany, and we also are, I'm trying to do that. I'm heading a sustainability task force now also on the European level, on the European Lubricants Association. It's not also only Fuchs, but it's always like that. If you start something, then everyone looks at you and said, well, great idea, but you need to do it. Okay, then you cannot just hide away. But I strongly believe this is important to have our own standards and our own benchmarks in our own industry. And yeah, I mean, it's just one slide, but we are still very much surprised because I can say more or less 1 year ago, it was really 1 year ago, there are many prizes, but there is this so-called German Sustainability Award, and we applied for it after 6 or 7 years, and believe it, I really mean it, I never thought that we might have any chance to win out of different reasons. Why did we apply? Because they offered, and we got that, a very intense feedback session once you apply, like where are we standing with sustainability? What do we have to do more and whatever? So we got this feedback, and there were 5 rounds, and in a nutshell, then all of a sudden we were nominated and we won this prize. There were more than 800, 900 applicants. Is still, so yeah, we still cannot believe it, but of course we take it. So this is just in order to tell you how big the team is for both the responsibilities. So this is the huge, large team. It consists just of 3 people, part-time. This is my sustainability manager. We are reporting to the member of the executive board who is responsible for technology, supply chain, product management. And as I said before, I cannot stress this very much. This would not be possible if we would not have 1 or at this point in time 2 working students who help us and support us. Not possible. Yeah. Okay. And with regard, that might be interesting. We cannot do this, if we want to be serious, completely alone with 3 people out of Mannheim. So what we did 2 years after we established sustainability is we nominated a so-called LSO, a local sustainability officer, in each and every production plant in the Fuchs world. So these are 24, and they are the counterpart to me, to the holding. We help them, they help us. So this is a network that we built, and of course we have got a regular Fuchs Sustainability Committee. There will be 2 more people, so who is there? There is the managing director of the biggest plant in the Fuchs world, which is in Mannheim. There is the chief of the OEM business, so for the sales side, there is the chief of the procurement business. Of course, it is important to have the purchasing side in, R&D is important. There will be 2 new members during this year, 1 for sales and 1 for product management. And finally, I still have 5 minutes from the 15. This is something which I just put in, I think 1 hour ago. And coming back to the, how do I do this? Coming back to the very beginning of the title of the presentation, which was Tomorrowing Your Business or Futuring Fuchs. E-mobility is a very good example to me on what I mean by this, because everyone knows about e-mobility, especially for loop manufacturers. It's more considered, sorry, like a threat, because quite easy. If the combustion engine goes and you've got a battery, then all the lubricants for the motor oils and the gear oils, more or less, will disappear. So it will certainly have an effect on motor oils and gear oils. But that is the reason why I showed you also the other slide before. Number 1, yeah, it's a threat. On the other hand, if you're a full-line supplier, you are still supplying so many different other applications of a car that, like many analysts, yeah, they always say, like, oh, your whole business is going down. Oh, it's not the case, yeah. A certain part of the business will be affected, certainly. But what I always try to say is, so we must ask ourselves the question, this is a threat, what do we do to sustain our business? This is the question. That is about sustainability. But we can also ask ourselves the question, is that not even an opportunity? And we believe it is. So what do we do with this trend of e-mobility in order to tomorrow our business? And I don't have a slide, but it is quite easy. If you think of a large OEM, a car manufacturer like BMW or whatever, And they also have to do their homework with regard to carbon footprint or whatever. As long as there was the combustion engine in the car, 90% of the impact from their point of view was in the use phase. So suppliers of lubricants or whatever ingredients was like 5 to 10%. There was no focus. If now the combustion engine is replaced by a battery, you will have not 90% impact, but just 10 or 5%. So the whole impact and the focus is going to be in the supply side on all those companies who deliver products, metal, leather, or lubricants. And that's why we can see this also as an opportunity if we have done our homework on sustainability and these are our customers, and the impact is 90% on the supply side, then we have got a lot of things to gain. That is my strong belief. So yeah, so it's not about only sustaining your business, it's about analyzing those disruptions and trends and see how can we tomorrow our business for the challenges to come. Yeah, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.